Alas, poor Yorick. But not poor me. I ditched the kids with a babysitter and went to go see a play last night. Last night, I went to see Hamlet put on by the Lord Chamberlain's men. This is a theater company that puts on the works of William Shakespeare as they were originally performed over 400 years ago. That means the cast is all male. In Shakespeare's time, it wasn't legal for women to work as actors in public, although royal and noble women certainly participated in court performances, and nothing would stop girls and women from play acting in private. So teenage boys, preferably ones whose voices hadn't broken, usually played the women's parts. From the all-male cast, to the mostly accurate Elizabethan costumes, to the minimal sets and props, the Lord Chamberlain's men tried to stay true to the original way that Shakespeare plays were performed. While I enjoy the constant reinvention of Shakespeare in modern productions, I think there's a lot of value to having a company that helps us understand what the original productions looked like. The Lord Chamberlain's men also remind us that while modern technology in theaters is really cool, it's not actually necessary to put on a good show. Like most teenagers, I first encountered Hamlet in high school. All too often, teenagers get introduced to Shakespeare the wrong way. They'll be handed a script to read, and they're not told anything about it, and you have to just kind of slog through the text, and there'll be periodic comprehension quizzes and that sort of thing. Then, if you've been a very good student at the end, your teacher will let you watch a movie version. I don't think this is a good way to teach, because all it really does is teach kids to think that they hate Shakespeare. To quote Hamlet out of context, the play's the thing. The best way to learn about a play is to see the play. I hated Hamlet when I studied it in school, but I've since seen dozens of different productions of it, and now of course I love it. This was the first time I'd ever seen an outdoor production of Hamlet. It was put on at Bradgate Park, which is a really famous country park here in Leicestershire. It's best known as the birthplace and childhood home of Lady Jane Grey, who was also known as the 9 Days Queen. So it was cool seeing a Shakespeare play in a location that was quite important during the playwright's own lifetime. Often Shakespeare in the park has the problem of noise because it's being performed in a public place. There'll be airplanes overhead, people walking their dogs, people picnicking and playing music, and it can kind of ruin the performance. But the advantage of Bradgate Park is that it's enormous and it's far enough from the city that it was very quiet, other than the occasional cry of a bird, which actually added to the atmosphere. The deer that lived at the park were uninterested in watching the show, but if they have bad taste, there's really nothing I can do about that. This was also the first time I'd attended a period-accurate performance of a Shakespeare play. There was no amplification, and the only special effect was a very, very small amount of artificial lighting at the front of the stage, which was used very sparingly. In fact, if I had one word to describe this performance, I would say minimal, and I mean that as a compliment. If you do the whole thing, Hamlet takes like 4 hours to put on, and most people aren't interested in sitting through that. Back in the 1500s, when plays would go on tour, it was really common to cut them down a little bit, and that's what they've done here. They managed to do the play in just over 2 hours by removing the entire subplot with Fortinbras and very, very skillfully cutting down the script to just the essentials. Only 7 actors were needed to cover all the roles in the play. In Shakespeare's day, props, sets, and even costumes were minimal. Actors had to carry everything on and off stage with them, so only the most essential items were used. And the audience was fine with this. They used the power of imagination to fill in the blanks. The performance itself matters a lot more than the superficial appearance of anything on stage, and I was pleased to see how well this worked, even when it came to the male actors playing women. Grown men are never going to convincingly imitate women, but the physical appearance isn't the most important part of a performance. These actors didn't try to hide the fact that they were men. Neither one wore a wig, and they didn't speak in a falsetto voice. Both of these things would have made the performance really rather cheesy. Instead of trying to convince my eyes, they convinced my mind. I was pleasantly surprised at how easy I was just able to accept that the actors were playing the parts of Ophelia and Gertrude, even though they weren't physically convincing as women. It just didn't matter. I took the performance seriously because the actors did. I was reminded, in fact, of Sam Rockwell's performance in that really awful film version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Unfortunately, that movie just didn't work. A lot of the actors weren't right for the roles they were given. It was poorly directed and so focused on the superficial appearance that the performance got forgotten. But there was one shining moment, and it's during the play within a play, when Sam Rockwell's character Frances Flute is playing a female character who is mourning the death of her lover. Frances Flute finds the ability to buy into his character fully, and out of nowhere it becomes this incredibly moving scene. It doesn't actually matter that it's a male actor playing a female character, and this is suggested when Flute pulls off his silly wig. A good actor committed to telling a good story will always be entertaining to watch, and our imaginations can look past any physical mismatch. Last night, I was able to look at a bare gray backdrop and see the walls of Elsinore Castle. I was able to see only 7 people on stage during the sword fighting scene and yet imagine an entire royal court. Things that are done minimally but well have a lot of power. I thought the standout actor was Hugh Brentnell, who played Horatio, and I really appreciated the interpretation of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern as having the vibe of stupid rich frat boys. My single favorite thing about the play was a very simple costuming choice. Usually the ghost of Hamlet's father is played by a guy in zombie makeup, and sometimes this looks great, and sometimes it looks a little silly. What they did here instead was to put a piece of black cloth inside the helmet that the actor wore, so his face was completely obscured. It really looked like the suit of armor was empty. It was such a simple choice to make, but it was really visually striking. So props to the costume department. I really enjoyed this performance by the Lord Chamberlain's men, and if you ever get the chance to see them on tour or in a theater, I really recommend grabbing tickets. Hamlet was a gutsy choice by this theater company because outdoor summer theater is usually a better setting for comedies rather than tragedies. Hamlet is moody and dark, and it's well served by the precise control over lighting and sound that a theater offers. Modern productions usually put microphones on actors, which allows them to create really quiet, intimate moments. You can't whisper when you have to project over a field full of deer and medieval ruins and people munching on picnics, so it's impressive that the Lord Chamberlain's men were able to create genuinely moving emotional moments, despite the fact that they had to keep the volume up to 11 the entire time. If anything, having to project more loudly helped them bring out some of the dark, twisted humor that's in Hamlet, and I laughed a lot more than I ever have before when seeing this play. Next summer, the Lord Chamberlain's men will be touring with Twelfth Night, and I will definitely be getting tickets for that one because it's my favorite Shakespeare comedy. If you've got teenagers who will be studying Shakespeare soon, please let me convince you to get them off to a great start by taking them to see a play or at least watching a decent filmed version before reading it. Plays are meant to be a live group experience. They're as lifeless as Yorick's skull if you just read scripts and leave it at that. Where are the jibes, gambols, songs, flashes of merriment? They're in the theater, or in this case, the country park down the road.